Let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for this morning. And we're thankful for the things that you show us from your word that bring us comfort and peace, and also that challenge us intellectually and spiritually. We ask, Lord, that your Holy Spirit can continue to guide and direct in our studies, and that the needs that we have at this time in Earth's history can be met by an understanding of your word. Bless each person, bless our time together. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Good morning, everyone. So we're continuing our study on Revelation 9, and we're going to deal with the fifth trumpet. So here I have on the board the first treaty of Constantinople, but I probably need to go to the scriptures first. So.
Do you mean on the screen?
Yeah, on the screen I meant, yeah. I'm still a bit asleep. I slept in, which I don't normally do. Okay. So if we go to Revelation chapter 9, we dealt with Abu Bakr's command, but we didn't deal with verse 5. So it was, the command was that they would not hurt any green thing, neither any tree, the grass of the earth, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And then it says, and to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when it striketh a man. Now, when it talks about killing them, what is it referring to? I mean, obviously, the Muslim armies killed people.
It's in a sense not bringing the kingdom to an end.
Yeah, so not bringing the kingdom to an end. So this is judgments upon Eastern Rome, but it's not going to kill. So that is they're going to torment them for 5 months, but they're not going to kill them. And trying to understand exactly why this language is here has always been one of the problems that I have, especially when you look at verse 9. And in those days, men shall seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. So if you were just reading this sort of superficially, not knowing anything about Bible prophecy, and you read verse 6, what would you think that it meant?
It sounds very similar to the plagues, to the time when people say the rocks fall on us.
Yeah. And so these are one of the reasons why people put this into the future as part of the plagues. So they would just look at these trumpets are just the plagues. This is talking about the plagues. So we would think, well, this is at the end when people are just seeking to die. But what would it mean in the context of Islam? How would we interpret this verse? I mean, I'm asking the question now, maybe we don't have enough to answer it.
It's like life is not pleasant. It's sort of like Job. He sort of wished he was dead, but rather than being in the position he was in.
Okay. So there's something going on here that we need to grasp, but I don't think that we really do grasp. So we know that Abu Bakr's command happens around the time of the death of Muhammad, and that this is going to mark the beginning of a period of 5 months. So I'm going to go to my notes here. So 150 years after the death of Muhammad, in 782, the First Treaty of Constantinople was enacted. Wikipedia sums it up thusly. The Abbasid invasion of Asia Minor in 782 was one of the largest operations launched by the Abbasid Caliphate against the Byzantine Empire. The invasion was launched as a display of Abbasid military might in the aftermath of a series of Byzantine successes. Commanded by the Abbasid heir apparent, the future Harun al-Rashid, the Abbasid army reached as far as Chrysopolis, across the Bosporus from the Byzantine capital, Constantinople, while secondary forces raided Western Asia Minor and defeated the Byzantine forces there. As Harun did not intend to assault Constantinople and lacked ships to do so, he turned back. The Byzantines, who in the meantime had neutralized the detachment left to secure the Abbasid army's rear in Phrygia, were able to trap Harun's army between their own converging forces. The defection of the Armenian general Tatzates, however, allowed Harun to regain the upper hand. The Abbasid prince sent for a truce and retained high-ranking Byzantine envoys, who included Empress Irene's chief minister, Starapios. This forced Irene to agree to a 3-year truce and pay a heavy annual tribute. Irene then focused her attention to the Balkans, but warfare with the Arabs resumed in 786 until mounting Arab pressure led to another truce in 798 on terms similar to those of 782. So we have this First Treaty of Constantinople in 782. Now, this treaty was signed on the 17th Muharram, that's the first month in the Islamic calendar, in the 166th year of the Hajj, which aligns with August 31st, and some suggest September 1st, 782. From then on, there were a series of treaties between Islamic forces and the Byzantine Empire. It is this first treaty that marks the end of the first period of 5 months. We're not the first ones to recognize this period of 150 years. In fact, it is often the only period of 5 months recognized by commentators in interpreting Revelation 9. One thing that may confuse some readers is that the Islamic year is 166. So from 632 to 1782 is 155 lunar years, while being only 150 solar years, since 632 is the 11th year of the Hajj. This is consistent with a 1-year drift every 32 and a half years. So just a little note, because this is from my presentation on analysis of the chronology of Revelation 9. So I put in a lot of these little details here. But yeah, you can see that they're not adding the leap years or the leap months every 2 or 3 years. So it causes it to drift over that period of 150 years by 5 years. They have 5 extra years in there, which is interesting. Okay, so to look at this visually, we will look at this chart. So here we have the 5th trumpet. And just to kind of zoom in on this, you can see Muhammad is 606. That's going to be the beginning of the 5th trumpet. And then we have 632, Abu Bakr, who's the first caliph. And then there's 150 years to 782, the Treaty of Constantinople. Now, there's going to be lots of other treaties and so forth, but the fact that this is the first treaty and it marks the end of all of these battles that go on between Islam and Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire. Even though there's skirmishes, there's battles and so forth, this is really this period of progress really ceases by this time. I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that. Now, the thing that we want to look at is this 517 years to 1299. So we're going to have another period of 150 years, which is the one that Adventists generally recognize, because this is the rise of the Ottoman Empire. And that we have these two periods of 5 months was recognized back in 2015. And Jeff picked up on it and thought it very significant. At the time, I was rather tentative about it, in that I saw these two periods of 150 years, but I didn't really know what it meant. And I did see this period of 517 years, and that it was divided in this way. So this is 2015 that we're looking at this. These are my notes from 2015, though originally I think I had 629 in here, so I corrected that to 606. And this structure here, the 126 and the 391, what does this remind us of?
This is the days that were counted in 2018.
Yeah, so in 2018, so like 3 years later, we're going to be counting a period of 126 days followed by 391 years. Now you can see in this diagram, I have this division here is a different division. There's two different divisions that I have of these 517 years. The 1173 division is let's see, and this is from my later notes, so I'm trying to remember how I did that. I think I did the division as 126 and 391. This would have been Odilio's division, 391 and 126. So let's read through this here in my notes, see how this fits. Okay, so from 782 to 1299, the period of 517 years has been noted as being equal to 391 years plus 126 years, though it has been divided by either events as 908 or events in 908 or events in 1173. In the presentation in July of 2015, the author suggested that the 517-year period be divided with a period of 126 years from 782 to 908, with a period of 391 years counting back from the first invasion of Othman into Nicomedia on July 27th, 1299. There are two events we can mark in 908. The first is on May 15th, when the 3-year-old Constantine VII, the son of Emperor Leo VI the Wise, is crowned as co-emperor of the Byzantine Empire by Patriarch Euthymia I at Constantinople. The ceremony is held in the Hagia Sophia. After the rituals, Constantine is crowned symbolically and becomes Leo's successor. The second is on December 17, when Husayn ibn Hamdan leads a revolt to depose the newly appointed Abbasid Caliph al-Muqtadir in Baghdad. He installs his uncle Abdallah ibn al-Mu'taz and kills Vizier al-Abbas ibn al-Hassan al-Jajariya, but fails to murder al-Muqtadir. This leads finally to the coup's collapse. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the year 908, and I'm looking at two events. So what are these events symbolically? Why would these be significant? Because I'm not saying that there is because this is a division of these period of 517 years. And what I really had done is I'd counted back 391 years from 1299 and noticed this event or these events. Notice this year and just said, what happened in this year? So I wasn't really looking for fulfillment of prophecy as such, but I was just seeing what occurred in this year. And so this to me seemed to be a natural division that I could divide it as 391 and 126. So remember, 126 is just 1/10 of 1260. At that time, I'm not connecting it to what happened in 2018. I'm just looking at this period of 391 years and see that I can divide 517 by 391 and 126. So these two separate periods. So what is it that we're looking at here in 908 that would be significant? Okay, so what two nations are being dealt with here? These are events in
Byzantium and Islam.
Okay, so Islam and Byzantium, the Byzantine Empire, they're both having these events. So what would the crowning of this child as co-emperor, as Leo's successor, Constantine's being crowned? Of course, he's just a 3-year-old, so he's not going to become king at that point or emperor. He's just being crowned as emperor in a symbolic way. What would this mean prophetically as a symbol? Okay, what happens at the end of the 150 years from 1299? What happens in 1449?
That's when the new emperor seeks the acceptance and credibility from the Islamic leader.
Yeah, so Constantine the 11th is going to be crowned as the emperor, right?
I think there was some debate as to who was going to take over. And I
Right.
think they asked the Islamic leader to try to be an intermediate area, translate the word. Intermediary. No, to help sort of that decision.
Okay, so if you look at my thinking, the way that I'm looking at this is I was creating a mirror. That's what I was trying to do with the 391 years. So we're going to have this 150 years. Now, this is Odilio's division of it, but I was looking at this 150 years and I was going to count back 391 years. So mine's going to be a 908, not 1173. But we know this 150 years goes forward, and then you have 391 years going to 1840. So I was just simply using a mirror. I'm saying, well, if I go back 150 years, so I'm going to go back 391 years from the beginning of the 150 years instead of forward 391 years from 1449 at the end of the 150 years. Do I have an event that's similar or reminds me of what happens in, I guess here at the beginning of this period, right? So, and we know that 1449 also relates to 1840. right? So I guess the way that I'm looking at it is 908, does it tell us anything about this history that's coming in the future? I'm not saying it very well, but you understand what I'm saying is that we have events that are being marked on this line in Josiah Litch's prophecy. We have 1299, which is going to mark a period of the start of 150 years on July 27th, which we're going to look at. And then there's going to be 1449 that marks the end, and then 391 years in the future. And so I'm looking at Constantine 11th here and saying that Constantine the 7th in some ways relates to what happens in 1449. Is that sort of a, that is, I can take that 391 in this 517 years and sort of overlay it of the 391 that begins in 1449. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, by seeing the chart makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay, so the chart, say,
Yeah.
yeah. When I look at here, I'm gonna get a different picture here. Okay. Both these other charts, but they don't look as good. So maybe I'll go over here. Thought I had another chart. No, that's not the chart I'm looking for. For some reason, I don't have the one with the right division here. I just have this one with the 1173. But anyway, yeah, because I don't have 908 in here. But yes, if we can imagine 908's over here and 391 years is going from here to here, then we can see that there's this, the start of this period of 391 years, not in 782, but in 908. It's analogous to some degree with what happens in 1449 with Constantine the 11th. But we also have these events in Islam. So we have events that are happening in the Byzantine Empire. And then we're also having these events that are happening in Islam. So this is a this period here from the Abbasid Caliph, or the so this is the Abbasid Caliphate that's happening, and we're going to have this coup. So what would be, I mean, probably lots of coups happen throughout Islamic history, but this coup is going to fail. It's going to collapse. So what would this be representing? That these
You mean in modern times?
well,
in our day?
I'm just trying to say, as far as these are prefiguring events that are going to be happening in the line of this prophecy. So that's what I'm saying is I'm saying in 908, we have these two events, and they have some symbolic import, even though there isn't a prophecy of the 391 years going back from 1299. The fact that I could make this division and that it seemed like a significant number, 126 and 391. And so I look at these events in 908 and I say, does this give me any information about the prophecy? Does this relate to the prophecy at all? Even though there's nothing about this time period, that is, there's no reason that we have to mark 908. But I simply do mark it back in 2015 because I think it's significant because of what happens in 908. So,
I was going to suggest it connects with the events in around the 1838 to 1840 time period,
okay,
when you had the Egyptian Pasha, whatever it was, trying to usurp or have some rebellion against the caliph
right.
in Istanbul.
Yeah, so I think this relates, at least in an analogy. It's analogous to things that are happening in the later period of the 391 years. And that's all I was trying to say back in 2015. I was just saying, here we have this date, we have this structure. I wasn't relating it to 2018, which I think is an important point, because in 2018, to understand what happened in 2018 and why I saw the significance of the 391 and the 126, because I had already marked these as symbols in this prophecy of Islam. And that's kind of the point. Whether my reasoning for marking that was necessarily sound or not, we can look back in retrospect and say it was providential. So that I noticed things in 2015 that we would then notice again in 2018, I think is one of the main keys. But also that there is these symbolic connections or things that are prefiguring what's going to be happening in the actual prophecy itself. So I wrote this. I wrote after 2018. So
I have a question.
yeah.
We normally connect the first trumpet and the second trumpet to having woes. And
Yeah.
we normally connect these here woes to time periods. The first will be in 150 years, and the second will be in 391 years and 15 days.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, with this here fifth trumpet now, we're identifying the woe. We generally accept it to be the 150 years from 1299 to 1449.
Yeah, that's the woe.
Okay, so why would that be a woe and this not a woe?
Okay, well, that's a good question. And because this is going to be dealing with the fall of the Ottoman Empire, or not the fall of Constantinople, and the rise of the Ottoman Empire. So we're going to address that, because that's in Revelation 9 itself. So the fact that we have these 250-year periods, and we have all this time in the fifth trumpet that's not considered a woe, but we do have the 150 years that is a woe. We'll look at why it's a woe. Okay, but it is a good question, because I don't think many people ask that question. So let's look at what I wrote here. So we'll come back to that question. So whether or not one accepts these events as a strong marker to end a period of 126 years and begin a period of 391 years. There are some interesting chronological suggestions for this structure. The first is that it is this structure that was discovered on October 13th, 2018, and then seen to be the same structure that is one of the connections to Samuel Snow's letters. Also, the period of 517 years, plus either the first or last, which we have not yet addressed, period of 150 years.
Are you sharing?
Oh, I'm not sharing, sorry. Okay, I'll go back and read this again, this paragraph. Whether or not one accepts these events as a strong marker to end the period of 126 years and begin a period of 391 years, there are some interesting chronological suggestions for this structure. The first is that it is this structure that was discovered on October 13th, 2018, and then seen to be the same structure that is one of the connections to Samuel Snow's letters. So Samuel Snow's letters has this same structure. also the period of 517 years, plus either the first or last, which we have not yet addressed, period of 150 years is 667 years. That is, if you take 517 plus 150, you get 667. So that's one more year than 666. More specifically, from August 31st, 782 to Othman taking the throne on January 6, 1449, is a period of 666 years, 4 months, and 6 days. From his arrival to Constantinople on March 12, 1449, is a period of 66 years, 6 months, and 12 days. If we consider from June 8th, 632, with the death of Muhammad, to July 27th, 1299, it is a period of 667 years, 1 month, and 19 days. So it just shows that this is roughly a period of 666 years that we can connect to Islam. It has been suggested by others that 1173, with the establishment of the Ayyubid dynasty, divides this period of 517 years with a period of 391 years, followed by 126 years. So we're going to look at the events in 1173. Ayyubid dynasty, Muslim dynasty, founded by Saladin, that ruled in the late 12th and early 13th centuries over Egypt and what became Upper Iraq, most of Syria, and Yemen. Saladin's father, Ayyub, in full, I'm not going to read his name, for whom the Ayyubid dynasty is named, was a member of the family of Kurdish soldiers of fortune who in the 12th century took service under the Seljuk Turkish ruler in Iraq and Syria. Appointed governor of Damascus, Ayyub and his brother Shirkuh united Syria in preparation for war against the Crusaders. After his father's death in 1173, Saladin displaced the Shiite Fatimid dynasty, further mobilized Muslim enthusiasm to create a united front against the Crusades, and made Egypt the most powerful Muslim state in the world at that time. The solidarity maintained under Saladin disappeared just before his death in 1193. Following his distribution of his territories among vassal relations who enjoyed autonomous internal administration of their provinces, the Ayyubid regime became decentralized, semi-feudal family federation. Whether or not one or the other are both are correct, it is compelling that the period of 517 years can be divided in this manner, even if the suggested events seem arbitrary or insignificant. It has also been observed that a period of 517 years is 6,214 months. That's 517 times 12. The main chronological symbol for Islam is the 26th day of the 4th month, or the 4th month, 26th day. 6204 is understood as a mirror of 4th month, 26th day. As we will see, it is this date on the biblical calendar that marks each of the dates in Josiah Litch's prophecy, except the last one, August 11th. One or two of these occurrences could be taken as coincidences. We will find that they occur repeatedly. As such, they must be taken as evidence of design. So when we go back to this chart here, and we're going to look at, so this is the date that Odilio chose, 1173, because he thought it was more significant. So this has to do with the transition from the Fatimid dynasty to the Ayyubid dynasty. Now, this is happening in the midst of these crusades. So we all heard about the crusades, and this is something that I've been reading into. It's a very complicated history. I don't have a good grasp of all the crusades and what happened. You know, in my mind, I've read through it. I've written some stuff out. But in this period of the Crusades, one of the things that occurs is Constantinople is going to be taken over by by the papacy. The papacy is actually going to conquer Constantinople. And So you got your mic, Jeff. Can you turn it off, please? So you're going to have Constantinople being conquered, and it's going to be retaken. So this is a really interesting history of what happens, especially when you consider the dates that these occur on, these sieges and these conquerings of these things. But so a lot's happening in this history with Islam. So when we get to the Ottoman Empire, there's going to be a change, though, that happens to Islam. So let's try to answer Stephen's question. So go back to the Bible. And sort of my question as well about this man seeking death. So in verse 5, so we know that this period of 5 months, that they should be tormented. They should not kill. Their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their head were, as it were, crowns of gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. And they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots, of many horses running to battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. So what Uriah Smith does and most Adventists do is they would just look at this period of 5 months that's talked about in verse 5 and this period of 5 months in verse 10 and just say that that's all the same period. That's just talking about from 1299 to 1449. Now it's going to say in verse 11, they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. One woe is past, and behold, 2 woes more, or there come 2 woes more hereafter. So what reason would we say that these are not the same period of 5 months? Okay, let's look at Proverbs chapter 30, verse 7. The locusts have no king, yet they go forth all of them by bands. So what does this say about locusts? And how does this relate to Revelation 9?
I get it from what you're trying to bring up here is that the first 5 months, there was no real main leader
Okay.
over Islam, although we do have caliphs and stuff, but with Othman, it became more like a kingdom.
Yeah, it became a kingdom, right? So you do have people rallying at different times, some of the Islamic forces to battle. So they're united in that sense. But under Othman, it creates an empire. So they have a king over them. So locusts don't have a king over them. It says in Psalm 30, verse 7 or 27. But they do have a king over them when you get to the first woe, because that's talking about Othman. And also we have Abu Bakr's command, and Abu Bakr's command is Islam operating in that they're they're hurting but not killing. Right? They're going to, be stinging their enemy. And their enemy is the Byzantine Empire, right? So this isn't talking about people, it's talking about the Byzantine Empire. And then what's happening in that period? So from the time that Islam arises, especially the first period of 150 years begins with Abu Bakr. What's occurring? What's the primary events that are being marked? What's the primary kingdoms? Where is the major conflicts?
Well, in them first 150 years, they expand even to Tours, I think, in France.
Yeah.
And large parts of North Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And
basically the territory that the locust covers, they cover that area.
yes.
Okay. And so that's going to happen in that first period of 150 years. But they're not going to be conquering the Byzantine Empire. That's not the purpose of them. But they are going to expand. So they are going to be the scourge, basically, that affects both Eastern Rome and also Western Rome. Now, then what you're going to have is you're going to have the Crusades. So this is going to be the papacy coming and trying to retake Jerusalem. At least that's the main purpose of it. These are kind of misguided crusades in what they accomplished and so forth is kind of, they didn't really accomplish much. But they became a distraction. Islam became a distraction to the papacy in their persecution of those that were opposed to the papacy, that is, the persecution of Christians. Correct? So Islam is going to affect the papacy, even though primarily their role is going to be to overthrow Eastern Rome, because that's what the fifth and sixth trumpet is about the fall of the Eastern Rome.
Well, you had crusades also against the Cathars in southern France around that time.
Yeah.
As well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot going on. It's a very complex history. I mean, to sort of get a grasp of that period of, let's say 666 years, it's pretty tough. Leading up to 1299, there's just a lot going on. So, and I don't have a grasp of it. I don't understand everything. I've read a lot, but a lot of it doesn't stick in my mind. I don't have like a personal vision, personal experience in it or anything. It doesn't really relate to anything else. So I can't remember it all. But yeah, so we have all of these. There's not a lot to relate it to, I guess, from what I know in the past. So this is kind of, I guess it's sort of like the Dark Ages. So, we don't spend a lot of time studying it nowadays. But anyway, we can see that in 1299, we're going to have this rise of the Ottoman Empire. And this is going to be organizing or uniting Islam in a way that it wasn't united before.
I have one question.
Okay.
What does this period of 666 years represent? So judging from the number, of course, it is a reference to the mark of the beast, right, in Revelation.
Yeah.
So this would suggest that so mark of the beast is like the Sunday law, right? In our at the end of time.
Mhm.
So this would suggest that these periods, 150 years plus 391, they could give us the date of the Sunday law, right? If we choose appropriately the starting point.
Well, I understand what you're saying, though we've already applied these periods to our history, that is, to the history of this movement. And my understanding when it came to, whether I'm right or wrong, but my understanding when we started doing time setting is that I believed that time setting only really applies to this movement. That is, it was given to us because we're analogous with Millerite history, but that when it comes to the times with the second coming, the close of probation, the loud cry, all these different things that Ellen White says that we cannot know the time of, I argued that even though we're time setting in this movement, we're not going to contradict Ellen White's statements. Ellen White is correct that those events on the big line, we have no knowledge of as to their time. We can know that they're approaching, and that's what this movement is showing. But to say that we can know the date of the Sunday law, my argument with December 25th, 2021, is that the Sunday law couldn't happen before then, but it would have to happen after then. But that was as far as our line could take us. So we've already applied these 391, the 126, the 150, all these different things. We've applied them already to our line, and they've given us the chronology that we have relating to the 777 days. So, but I don't think we can see beyond that as far as definite time.
And it's interesting because if we continue, okay, we have the historic historic timeline, 1299, 1449, 1840, and then if we continue from 1840 with what? With 126 years. So what does it give? Is it significant?
Well, it's not as simple as that. So yeah, we looked at all those different things. So the main thing was Josiah Litch's prophecy, dealing with the half of a month, and we applied a half of a year because it's 391.5. So we mixed Ezekiel's prophecy and Josiah Litch's prophecy together because of the two different symbols, the 26th day of the fourth month and the 10th day of the fifth month that comes from Ezekiel. And that gave us the date July 18th, 2020. So we already made these applications by looking at these prophecies. So back in 2015, then 2016, I was studying first Josiah Litch's prophecy and then Ezekiel. And then in 2017, Samuel Snow's letters. And those all came together in 2018 with the prediction of July 18th. So all of that was already done. We already made that application. So I don't think we're going to make another application that's going to have some kind of definite time setting.
It seems not to make much sense. So I was just thinking, 1840 plus 126, it gives 1966. So what happened over there? It doesn't seem to make much sense.
Right. But the thing is, we already did make an application. And see, the thing is, people often will take something like that and sort of make this sort of, because we tried those things, right? We looked at them. But what we found is the structures, when we go back to the Old Testament, because all of these structures come from Old Testament prophecy, that what we often do is try a simple sort of application of that. We'll just say, okay, let's count 126 years. We do know we use 126 in our line, but we don't count from 1840, right? So we're going to count 126 years from 1863 and also from 1888.
Okay.
So 126 years does come to play It's just that there are other structures that tell us where to place these. And the other structure is the two 2520s. So the 2520s and also early Adventist and Millerite history also give us these structures. So the structures are a little more complex than just simply taking 126 years and adding it to 1840.
I see, okay. And 126 is actually a symbol of 1260, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's also a symbol of 2520 because of the 126 shekels of Daniel.
Oh, yeah, 2520, so double, yeah.
There's a difference.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this makes it a bit more clear for me. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, you're welcome. Yeah, so these are the things. To me, the most important part of this is that we were seeing these structures, at least I was, going back to my study of chronology of the prophecies of the past, before these structures were seen in our history itself. And that's the reason why that we saw these structures and that they became significant, the 126 and the 391, is because we could see them in Samuel Snow's letters and in our history itself, dealing with the prediction of November 9th and also connected to July 18th. So all of these structures came from the study of Old Testament prophecy and also the prophecies of Revelation. So they weren't made up in 2018. And this was part of the problem, is that many people weren't aware of all the work that had been done because it had been buried and maligned even prior to 2018, so that people were, for whatever reason, not willing to even look at these studies. So when it came up in 2018, it was kind of new to a lot of people. But Stephen and I had already been working on these things. So when we started time setting as such, and we then saw that these structures all fit together in this sort of like a jigsaw puzzle, then we had to acknowledge that this was from God, even though we don't believe in time setting. That is, we know that Ellen White says that we're not going to have, the third angel's message is not going to hang on time. And we looked at a lot of her statements in other studies to show that there's a limitation to time setting for this movement, but that time setting does exist and time does exist in this movement for a very specific purpose. And that is to prepare us to give a message to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that it wasn't meant to do what we thought it was meant to do, that is to predict these events. So this becomes an important part in studying this prophecy of Revelation 9. And I think the study that Dwight did yesterday is also important in connection with this, because he's really addressing the 666 years of Miller. And we see that the 666 years apply here to Islam, and in various ways as well that we're going to look at as we get into more detail, as we look at the prophecy of Josiah Litch and how it connected to our prediction of November 9th and July 18th, and why we predicted the events that we did to be at Nashville on July 18, 2020. This was all purposeful, part of God's plan for this movement to understand some things. And if we don't learn the lessons from this, then that message will be passed on to someone else to give. So this point here, going back to they have a king over them, up from 632 with Abu Bakr, the first caliph, we see this expansion of Islam, but they're only going to expand so far, and they're not going to conquer Constantinople, even though the papacy does. The papacy conquers Constantinople for a short time, and then it's reconquered. And I'm going to look at that tomorrow, because I'm going to deal with some of that history tomorrow. But now we have the rise of the Ottoman Empire. And And this is pretty well established, but I'm going to go to my notes and spend a bit of time with this. So I'm going to skip all this crusade stuff and the retaking of Constantinople. I'm going to come back to that tomorrow. While Wikipedia gives July 27th, 1302 for the Battle of Baphius, the battle which launched the Ottoman Empire, Gibbon gives July 27th, 1299. Now, there's this excellent article in Ministry Magazine that upholds Gibbon's date. It shows that Gibbon depended on the work of Petri Possini or Petrus Posinus. This date is verified by several synchronisms and eclipses of the sun and moon. There's also Grace Amadon's 1844 ministry article. So when it comes to this date, July 27th, 1299, this is the date that Turkey itself recognizes. But if you're going to go to Wikipedia, they're going to say it's July 27th, 1302. And this comes from the result of a misreading of history. And it's actually a misreading of Petri Possini. Now, this guy, Petri Possini, is a person who writes contemporaneous with those events. So when we deal with the retaking of Constantinople tomorrow, we're going to deal with that. We're going to see that this is all connected, that this history, because the retaking of Constantinople happens in what year? Can't remember. Didn't end up finish writing that, so I'm gonna have to come back to that. But it's prior to what ends up happening here. So there's a whole bunch of things happening. Pachymeres, that's the guy. Not Possini, but Pachymeres is the one who's alive at the time that the Ottoman Empire rises to power. I think it's 1261 is the retaking of Constantinople. But anyway, so you have this, the common date, and this is why many people reject Josiah Litch's prophecy, is they look at contemporary scholarship that argues for July 27, 1302. And if that's the case, if it was in July 27, 1302, Josiah Litch's prophecy would fall apart. But chronology is a funny thing because people can easily come up with different dates. We see this with 457 BC or whatever date, 677. People argue, well, that's not the correct date. It's easy to be a naysayer. It's much more difficult to create a date that's established that stands the test of all the evidence. That is, people often use partial evidence to make arguments for a particular date, but don't look at all of the evidence. Once you look at all of the evidence, you'll see that 1299 is the only possible date that works. Now, Heidi Hikes, in his book, Satan's Counterfeit Prophecy, argues against the 1299 date and tries to argue for the 1302 date, because of course he rejects Josiah Litch's prophecy. But Dr. Alberto Treyer, he does very thorough scholarship to show that Hikes is wrong. And then Hikes' response is interesting. He just shifts the argument. He doesn't actually address any of the points that Treyer makes, which is always very telling. So if somebody has made an argument, but in order to attack that argument, you ignore the argument itself and you shift it to a bunch of other secondary arguments, then usually it's because you don't actually have a good answer to the person's argument. So Treyer responds with some thorough research that establishes beyond all doubt that the Battle of Baphius occurred in 1299. And I try to lay out his arguments. I never did finish this. So this section here on the rise of the Ottoman Empire, I never finished it, but I'm going to just read what I wrote at that point. So it says, finish this later, as you can see. The Julian date of July 27th is not in contention, nor the significance of the battle in marking the rise of the Ottoman Empire. What is in contention is the year in which the battle occurred. The primary source for determining the year is the contemporaneous historian, George Pachymeres. So he lived from 1242 to 1310. Pachymeres was born in Nicaea in Bithynia, where his father had taken refuge after the capture of Constantinople by the Latins in 1204. So in 1204, you're going to have Constantinople being taken over by the papacy, that's the Latins. And it's going to be then upon the recovery of the city from the Latin Empire by Michael VIII Paleologos in 1261, Pachymeres settled in Constantinople. We would have to consider his account very reliable. Pachymeres gave the day and month of that battle, but not the year. So when he went back to this day and month, July 27th, he doesn't say what year it's in, at least not directly. He doesn't say July 27th, 1299. So it took place on July 27th. Petrus Posinius in the 17th century and Edward Gibbon in the 18th century concluded that the Battle of Baphius took place in the year 1299. However, ever since the proposal of Joseph von Hammer in the 19th century, so this is another scholar, most historians have dated the first battle, or the battle first, to 1301 and finally to 1302. The almost standard historical view today is that Baphius fell to the Turks on July 27th, 1302. And so I say here, we lay out the arguments, which of course I don't, because I was still reading through this and trying to sort out how to write it out. And I wrote a bunch of stuff and then it was too confusing. So I ended up editing it or deleting it, I guess. But the basic arguments that Treyer uses is he shows these different events that are marked, and a lot of it has to do with the weather. So there is other contemporary accounts of different things that occurred at that time in that area. And so when you put all the information together, you can see that the date is 1299, not 1302. But why would the date 1302, why would people try to hang on to that date? Why would the date 1299 be so contentious? I mean, especially when you look at the evidence, it points to 1299. But why would modern scholarship choose 1302?
Are we talking non-Adventists?
Well, even Adventists choose 1302 now.
Yes.
So why do they choose 1302?
Well, this is like an attempt to destroy Josiah, to discredit Josiah Leach's interpretation, right? If it's done by Adventists.
Yeah, so we're going to see that, we have seen that when it comes to the 2300 days, modern scholarship doesn't accept 457 BC for Ezra's journey from Babylon to Jerusalem. They argue that it happened a year earlier. And that would undo the 2300 days. It would undo the 70 weeks as well. I mean, you would have to come up with a different interpretation. You'd have to have Jesus crucified in 30 AD, not 31, to get 490 years. And of course, the 2300 days wouldn't work. It'd have to be a year earlier. So, you know, there's all these different types of problems. Same thing with the 2520, even though it's been long established that it's 677 that Manasseh was taken captive. People will bring everything they can to bear against that date, even to the point where they say, well, he couldn't have been in Babylon in 677 because he was in Assyria in 677. Of course, Babylon is in Assyria in 677, but people will argue tooth and nail against Bible prophecy. And so anything that can undo Bible prophecy is usually done. Now, somebody can say, well, that's just a conspiracy theory, but I don't think it's a conspiracy theory in the sense that this is what Satan does. It's not like men are particularly planning, the people who pick 1302 aren't particularly looking at Josiah Litch's prophecy. But Satan is inspiring men to revise history.
This is very much a reality, you know. So, and one very effective strategy of destroying a building is taking, let's say, one brick out time, and then at a certain point, the entire building is going to fall, right? And this is what they are doing today. I mean, they're trying to destroy all these important pieces that make up the Adventist prophetic foundation. And Josiah Litch's prophecy is one such important piece.
Yeah, and see, this goes back to me becoming a part of this movement in 2010. So I'm looking at history. I'm looking at people talking about the 2520, and I don't find at that time that this movement had done a good job of defending the dates. And actually, they were using a lot of bad arguments. For instance, 723 BC. When I came into this movement, people were arguing that Samaria fell in 723 BC. And the person that they were using to support that was the Adventist scholar. What's his name? It slips my mind at the moment. Edwin Thiel. So Edwin Thiel says that Samaria fell in 723. And so people would just say, well, that's a date. We found somebody who says a date that we agree with to start the 1260 or for paganism. So from 723. But Samaria doesn't fall in 723. It falls in 721. Hoshea is taken captive in 723. And if you look at Edwin Thiel's chronology, it's a mess. I mean, he has completely different chronology. He doesn't even have Hoshea and Hezekiah as contemporaries in 723. He says Hezekiah is not even king until 10 years after the fall of Samaria. So these types of things, this type of support that we had, I guess, for our position, to me was very weak. So what I had to do is I had to go back and do research. And I was willing to take whatever conclusions I came to using the Bible and the spirit of prophecy and any evidence that agreed with the Bible. So obviously there are things that contradict the Bible, but I didn't take them as valid. I accepted that the Bible is true. So when I went through and started to establish this, I started to find this structure of prophetic chronology, that all of these prophecies were connected together. And this was a strong support for the truthfulness of our movement, in that we found, because of the things that we had found by going back to the old paths, that it meant that this movement was being led of God. And all of these things led to the July 18, 2020 prediction. So Elder Jeff recognized that even in his own experience, all the things that he had studied had led him to this prediction as well, that this was 100% consistent with the way that God had led us. Yeah. many of the people ended up rejecting July 18th and rejecting all of the arguments on chronology. But once you do that, you destroy the foundation. Somebody had a comment there?
Yeah, I was going to say, concerning this battle of Baphius, we still considered this year 150 years still credible, even without reckoning that date to the Battle of Baphius. We used Uriah Smith's suggestion that it related to the events of Othman in Nicomedia.
Yeah.
So,
Well, but still, you're going to still put it at, you still need July 27th, 1299. Right?
yes,
So so you need that date. And so you need the events to be in 1299, and they have to be on July 27th. So I don't think that you could just take the 150 years and say, well, it's 1299, but the Battle of Baphius was July 27th, 1302. And still have the 150 years.
well, that's what Uriah Smith still connected it to the 27th of July.
Without the Battle of Baphius.
Yes.
Okay. So what did he connect it to?
He connected it to Othman and Nicomedia.
Okay, but
He
what
began
about
to-
July 27th?
Say it again.
How does he get July 27th?
I'm not too sure who he references, but that's the date he gives. My understanding, anyway.
Yeah, because I have Uriah Smith's notes here. So let's take a look at these. So I'll bring up my Bible. Okay. So I'm just going to read about this 5 months. So here's what Uriah Smith says. The question arises, what men were they to hurt 5 months? Undoubtedly the same they were afterward to slay. Verse 15, the third part of men, or the third of the Roman Empire, the Greek division of it. When were they to begin their work of torment? The 11th verse answers the question. They had a king over them. From the death of Muhammad until near the close of the 13th century, the Mohammedans were divided into various factions under several leaders, with no general civil government extending over them all. Near the close of the 13th century, Othman founded a government which has since been known as the Ottoman Empire, or Ottoman government or empire, which grew until it extended over the principal Mohammedan tribes, consolidating them into one grand monarchy. Their king is called the Angel of the Bottomless Pit. An angel signifies a messenger, a minister, either good or bad, and not always a spiritual being. The Angel of the Bottomless Pit would be the chief minister of the religion, which came from thence when it was opened. That religion is Mohammedanism, and the Sultan was its chief minister. His name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, the destroyer, Greek Apollyon, etc. But when did Othman make his first assault on the Greek Empire? According to Gibbon, it was the 27th of July in the year 1299 of the Christian era that Othman first invaded the territory of Nicomedia. So this would be the Battle of Baphius that he's talking about. Would it not?
That would be, that's the date that Gibbon gave for the
Right.
Battle of Baphius.
Yeah. So that's the date he gives for the Battle of Baphius, which is this. They first invaded the territory of Nicomedia. So that's what they're now. Van Hammer. So this is the one that I referred to earlier. The German History of Turkey and other authorities have placed this event in 1301. But to what date do the historic sources of this period testify? Pachymeres was a church and state historian born in Nicaea which was in
Nicaea.
what, Nicaea?
I think is it Nicaea? No.
Nicaea? I don't know. Nicaea, maybe. Probably Nicaea, which was in the vicinity of the Ottoman invasion. And he wrote his history during this very period. He concluded his work about 1307, so he was a contemporary of Othman. And Pausanias in 1669 worked out a complete chronology of Pacameri's history, giving the dates for the eclipses of the moon and the sun, as well as other events recorded by Pacameri's in his work. Concerning the date 1299, Pausanias says, "Now it is our task to give the exact and fundamental epoch of the Ottoman Empire. This we shall try to effect by thoroughgoing comparison of the dates given by Arab chronologists and the testimony of our Pacameri's. The last mentioned author reports in the fourth book of this second part, chapter 25, that Othman grew strong by taking the command over a very strong band of bold and energetic warriors from Paphlagonia. When Muzzalo, the Roman army commander, attempted to block his progress, he defeated him in a battle near Nicomedia, the capital of Bithynia. This city, the lord of the battlefield, henceforth kept, as it were, besieged." Now, Pacameri's is very explicit in stating that these events took place in the immediate vicinity of Baphium, so it's the Battle of Baphius, not far from Nicomedia, on the 27th day of July, the year we affirm in our synopsis, comparing carefully the events that have been of our Lord in 1299. So this is where we get the July 27th, 1299. It's what this Battle of Nicomedia.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I think, so you had an idea that it was a different event?
Yeah, I just remembered he talked about Othman and Nicomedia. I couldn't remember where he
Yeah,
mentioned the Battle of Baphius.
right, okay. So the synopsis in which Pausanias refers gives the date of the uniting of these Paphlagonians with Ottoman forces, which took place on July 27th, as 1299 of the Christian era, 5th year of Pope Boniface VIII, and the 6th year of Michael Paleologos. The statement is as follows: Othman, the satrap of the Persians, called also Ottomanes, the founder of the still reigning dynasty of the Turks, grew strong by joining himself a great number of fierce bandits of Paphlagonia. The Paphlagonians, under the sons of Amurus, joined Othman in this attack of July 27th, so that Pausanias gives the date for this event twice as 1299. Right, so we know that modern scholarship has said no, they were wrong, that Pausanias was wrong in attributing to 1299, and they used other arguments to try to say it's 1301, but Treyer shows that it is 1299. He goes through all the other history and other events that we can then connect. So when people use 1301 or 1302, they're not looking at all the evidence. And this is always a problem that I find, is that, and it's not just with scholars, it's with all of us. We have very little knowledge of almost anything. Our knowledge is very, very limited. And we can always take a bit of information and draw a conclusion. But we have to look at all of the information, and that takes a lot of time. And mostly what people do is they just refer to other people's work, where they accept that somebody's statement is true without actually looking at the documentation themselves. So this is what I had to do on many, many things dealing with biblical history, is I had to look at everything. Everything had to fit. I couldn't just have draw a conclusion when I looked at something partly. And that's why, I don't expect that everybody can do that, but we can confirm through Bible prophecy, through the spirit of prophecy, and by looking at the scriptures and everything that we've seen happen in the past, we can at least affirm that God has been leading this movement, even if some of our details may be wrong, because We know the Millerites had some details wrong, but God still led them in spite of that. And that's what we're finding out as we continue to study this history, that there's a lot that we don't know. That is, I doubt that there are many people who accept Josiah Litch's prophecy, who understand the niceties of the argument to support July 27th, 1299. I mean, I barely understand them. It's very, very complicated history. I mean, I read over it. I looked at Treyer's arguments and I could see that he was correct, but I can't remember all of his arguments. And I doubt very many of you have looked at all of his arguments. So when somebody comes along and just says, Wikipedia says it's 1302, and Josiah Litch is wrong, and they bring up a number of reasons why they believe Josiah Litch is wrong. Nothing happened on August 11th, 1840. Nothing happened on July 27th, 1299. Nothing happened on, 677 BC. All these types of things that people bring up. Yet they don't even understand the arguments. It's easy to be a naysayer. It's much more difficult to establish something as true. This was the big problem with December 6th, 2020, with the declaration put out by those who were in charge of FFA at that time, is they didn't want to take the time to examine the evidence to see whether we were correct in our reckoning. They just said, since nothing happened on July 18th, we obviously were in error. It's the same arguments that was used against October 22nd, 1844, after the passing of the time. Since the event we predicted did not happen, we must have been wrong. And we have to understand, at least to our satisfaction, that this chronology is correct. Because if we come across 1302 and we read some arguments and we say, well, Josiah Litch's prophecy was wrong. The whole movement's been founded upon a wrong idea. Adventism has been founded upon false information. Ellen White was wrong when she supported Josiah Litch's prophecy. Why should I believe Ellen White when it came to October 22nd? October 22nd, Christ moving into the most holy place. That's just a face-saving device. But of course, we would have to apply that to the disciples when Jesus died. And people do. That is, when a person has loose threads in their belief system and somebody comes along and starts unraveling that, their whole faith dies. Now, what is the foundation of our faith?
Daniel 8:14.
Okay. So the sanctuary in connection with the 2300 days is the foundation of central pillar of Adventism. What does Ellen White say is the rock of ages? We should be familiar with this statement. Now, Christ is the rock of ages, isn't he?
Yes.
Ellen White says, Christ is the rock of ages. The Lord Jehovah is the rock of ages. So we all know that Christ is the rock of ages. But what is Christ? Like,
Is this a statement,
what's
a
that?
statement through types and symbols? Is that statement connected with it? No.
Yeah, so to understand who Christ is, to understand who the rock of ages is, to have a knowledge of Christ, we understand him because we need to present him to people in types and symbols. Let me see if I can find this other statement. Okay. Okay, so she says, this is from General Conference Bulletin, April 6, 1903. I'll show you the statement. This one we're all familiar with. She says, the warning has come, nothing is to be allowed to come in that will disturb the foundation of the faith upon which we have been building ever since the message came in 1842, 1843, and 1844. I was in this message, and ever since I've been standing before the world, true to the light that God has given us. We do not propose to take our feet off the platform on which they were placed, as, day by day, we sought the Lord with earnest prayer, seeking for light. Do you think that I could give up the light that God has given me? It is to be as the rock of ages. It has been guiding me ever since it was given. Brethren and sisters, God lives and reigns and works today. His hand is on the wheel, and in his providence, he is turning the wheel in accordance with his own will. Let not men fasten themselves to documents saying that they will do what they will do and what they will not do. Let them fasten themselves to the Lord God of heaven. Then the light of heaven will shine into the soul temple, and we shall see the salvation of God. In the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared unto his servants, the prophets. So the rock of ages, what is Ellen White saying, is to her that is as the rock of ages.
She talks about a platform.
Yeah, so this is a platform of truth. It's also the light that God gave her, right? And then it came from Millerite history, 1842, 1843, and 1844. So she's not just talking about light in 1850 and onwards or 1863 and onwards. She's going back to the foundation of this message. And she says in the paragraph before, may God help you receive the words that I have spoken. Let those who stand as God's watchmen on the walls of Zion be men who can see the dangers before the people, men who can distinguish between truth and error. Right? So we have righteousness and unrighteousness. So we have this foundation that was laid, and we don't have the church at the present time able to distinguish between truth and error. That it's even the people who we think we're standing for the truth have slowly been eroding the foundation. Even people like Doug Batchelor, he's been eroding the foundation along with everyone else. So we have to go back to our history and understand the prophecies that were given to this church and to see whether they really were laid correctly.
But why do you say Doug Batchelor has been eroding the foundation?
Because he's been rejecting the prophecies of the past, of Millerite history. So once you reject the 2520, that's an erosion of the foundation. So even though Doug Batchelor says a lot of good things, as time has gone on, he's participated in the rejection of light. Even though he's hanging on to something now, the 2300 days and things like that, people can exchange those things rather quickly. And what we saw with this movement with the Omega in 2019 was that the vast majority of this movement went from being conservative Adventists to progressives almost overnight.
Yeah, this is pretty strange. Yeah, this is pretty strange.
Yeah. And that's because they didn't have a foundation. And that foundation was being eroded by people like Parminder and Tess. And yet people accepted that. So I believe that that is an illustration of what will happen to Adventism. That's one of the reasons we were given that history happening in our movement, is to see the direction that the church can go in a blink of an eye. So that's why we need to understand these prophecies. We have to be built upon a solid foundation, because if it's not, when storm and tempest come, the structure will be swept away. And that refers to churches and also to us as individuals. Now, of course, the Rock of Ages is Christ, but Christ is understood by prophecy. We can't just get to know Christ by imagining that we're talking to him, by using visualizations and all these other types of spiritual exercises that can make a person feel holy, like they're connected with God. You could do the same thing with LSD, but it's not going to make you know Christ. Because in order to know Christ, it's understanding God's word, obeying it, following it, walking with Christ, being yoked up with him, learning in the school of Christ, learning to develop a Christ-like character. All these things are absolutely necessary to know Christ. And that's why we have prophecy. It connects us to Christ. So, any final comments before we close with prayer? Okay, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for the study this morning and for the way that you lead. We're thankful for the leading of this movement of the Adventist Church from its beginnings and the way that you have led your people in the past. And we know, Lord, that we are weak, that we intellectually have very little understanding, but that we can know the truth as we seek to understand it from a study of your word and from a personal knowledge of Christ. We ask, Lord, that you can continue to work in our lives, in the lives of each individual who is studying and searching for truth, and that we can come to a unity of the faith and an understanding of the Son of God. Continue to be with us this week in these studies, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.